The Birth Circle podcast features experts in all the nuanced areas of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum with the aim of helping women make the choices that will keep them safe, healthy, and empowered. We respect all birth choices and believe in supporting informed consent and evidence-based practices. Nothing said on this podcast should be taken as medical advice. You should always seek the advice of a competent professional for your care. Welcome to the Birth Circle podcast.
This is Sarah with Birth Circle, and today I'm joined by Kate Rope, and Kate is the author of this amazing book, Strong as a Mother, How to Stay Healthy, Happy, and most importantly, sane from pregnancy to parenthood. And let me tell you, she sent me a copy so I could look over it before this interview, and dang, this is an incredible book. She has everything broken down into these really edible little paragraphs, and all this information it's just yummy. She's also an award-winning freelance journalist whose work has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Time Magazine, and now Birth Circle. And she's a mom to two. So thank you so much for being here, Kate.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
All right, I'm ready to dig in.
Let's do it.
First of all, why did you write this book?
So I wrote this book because I wanted to be a mom my whole life. I knew this is the only thing I've ever known that I wanted to do. And then the experience kind of slapped me silly. It wasn't what I expected. It was much harder than I expected. And when I was looking through books, I had some medical complications during pregnancy, and that led to some anxiety during pregnancy, which eventually led to anxiety after pregnancy. And when I was looking through these books, none of them were talking about what I was going through. And I felt kind of like an alien in the world of pregnancy and preparation. And I would, go to these prenatal classes, and the women would talk about wanting to have a completely unmedicated natural birth. And I had just gotten out of a hospital and was like, I just want to be alive for my birth. So, or like I'd be taking medications for some of my health stuff, and it would be like, the book would be like, if you have a headache, just look at a Tylenol, but don't actually take it. And I was like, but I'm taking steroids. So I just felt like my experience wasn't reflected in anything. And then that made me feel like a freak. And so I started talking to other people and realizing that actually what I was experiencing, lots of it, from the medical to the anxiety to the run of the mill, lots of other people were having too. And I decided I wanted to write a book that just talked about what life-changing this transition is, and how there's beauty and struggle within it. And that's all beautiful. And let's just A, say it's okay to struggle, B, give you the information you need to work through whatever your struggle is. If it's just you need better sleep, if it's you need to have better sex with your husband, if it's you need to tell your partner you don't want to have sex, if it's, you think you have a postpartum mood disorder and you may need professional help, like whatever the struggle is, one is not better than another. It's a question of figuring out what you need and getting it and taking care of yourself. And I feel like ultimately all the books that are out there, all the books on pregnant women's and new moms nightstands are about the baby. And I wanted to write a book about moms and for moms.
Write a book about, because you don't mention the baby very much in here. It's all about
the babies are good. The babies
it's like
good.
it's like a side sprinkle. It's like a side dish, but it's not the main course.
No, they're covered. You got any number of books to talk to you about how to take care of a baby. I wanted to talk about how to take care of you.
Yeah. So what's one of the biggest myths of motherhood that you tackle in this book?
I think that it's easy and blissful.
It was for me. I don't know what's wrong with everyone else.
I know. It's just like that movie Knocked Up. I think it's so weird that we have this narrative in our culture that, it's an amazing thing that you can make a baby or that you can bring a baby into your home and raise that baby. That's amazing. But to think that that would be easy, like another human, like growing a human in you, or going through what you have to go through to bring a human in through adoption or surrogacy, third-party reproduction, all of that is incredibly challenging. And to think that you would just sail through that and then have a small being that is dependent upon you for survival, and that would be just easy and happy and blissful and smiley all the time.
Well,
I
not
don't know
only
why
is
we think that.
Yeah, not only is that a conundrum, but why we can go through it ourselves and struggle and really struggle and then turn around and judge other people for their journey.
Right. Right.
Like how that's even a bigger question. How that
I
even
think,
happens.
yeah, I think that, I mean, my theory on that is that because it is such a huge shift in identity and in life, that we try to find our bearing. And when we find it, whatever it looks like, for me, it's like being really emotionally in tune with myself and taking care of myself and doing the same for others. It's like now I'm an evangelist for mental health and taking care of your mental health. And if you decide, and if attachment parenting was what got you through, then you're an evangelist for that. Like, I think that's, and then I think, you know, you meet parents of like teenagers and they're like, I don't remember what I did,
I
because
know.
they've moved through it. But when you're really in it, it's like you're a zealot because you're newly
Yeah,
converted to
it's
whatever has
true.
gotten you through. And so I think it's really easy to think that you have the
A zealot.
answer.
Mhm.
And, you know, yeah, it's like the zealousy of the newly converted. So I don't blame people for that, but I do think that you have to know that's in the soup. Like, that's an ingredient that you're going to be
Yeah.
dealing with as a pregnant person and as a new mom.
So that leads me to my next question about unsolicited advice during pregnancy. So you're going to get unsolicited advice about parenting, but it starts in pregnancy.
Yeah, I mean,
How to
unsolicited
deal with
advice.
that?
Yeah, unsolicited advice, and then also statements about how things are going to be. Like, get sleep now, you'll never get it afterward, or, you know,
Hope you
or
enjoy those showers. Take them long.
exactly. And I think, again, at base, it comes from like human nature that we want to connect. We see a pregnant woman, we want to connect with her. We don't know her. We don't know how to
Why
do it.
why do we have this desire to connect with a pregnant woman?
I mean, I think that's like a mystical,
I know.
spiritual
There's
reproduction
yes, there must be
something.
some sort of pheromone. There must be
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. And, you know, especially like, I don't know, older men. And then they're the ones who get it, like sorry, older men, but like the most wrong, you know, they're the ones who say the weird things about how
Yeah.
big you are or how little you are.
Oh,
And
you look a little lopsided. That's cute.
yeah, because they're just so awkward. So I think like people want to connect, but then they screw it up sometimes because they're just humans, and they instead of like, the best way to not screw up an interaction with another human is to just ask questions instead of saying things. To be like, how are you? What's that like? You know. But instead we're like, we get diarrhea mouth, and then we're like, oh, are you having twins? You know, like, you're not going to get an epidural, right? And we just, so I think that pregnancy is a great time to practice setting boundaries. And that starts often with getting unsolicited advice or comments that, you know, make you, and they don't know what your story is. You know, you could have had 3 losses before you were pregnant, and that informs the way you feel about this pregnancy. Or, you know, someone who's carrying really small, maybe struggling with an eating disorder, and keeping that baby healthy, and being told they look small, which people think is a compliment, is a really scary thing for them because they're working to keep that baby
Yeah.
healthy.
So again, like
Being
you
told,
said, the best
it's
thing is not to say things, just to ask
just
questions.
ask questions. But I do have some comebacks, because
Yeah,
I
okay.
know not everybody's going to listen to that advice.
She's pulling out the book.
I got the book. So you know, for size, something like, you know, everybody carries differently, but I'm feeling great. Like, you know, you just kind of deflect from the topic of the way you're carrying. Or like, I love this one, growing a person inside of you is kind of amazing, right? Like, just let them know, like, I'm growing a person. I'm pretty busy with a big thing, and
Pretty
you know,
busy. Don't have time for you.
yeah. I mean, you could be straightforward. You could be like, thanks, I don't really like talking about my body. You know, it feels private. Can we talk about something else? You
Can you
know,
say something snarky like, oh yeah, it looks like you're 3 months along as well. How is that
oh,
going for
okay. Well,
you?
actually, I had a friend who would reach out and touch other people's bellies when they would touch her belly unsolicited, which I just thought was awesome.
Yeah, I would never have the courage.
And
I
I
was
know
always a little
I couldn't
mouse.
do that. You know, you could just like, how are you going to give birth? You know, well, that's a really private matter between, you know, my provider and I, or my partner and I, or, you know, we're still working on it. We're still thinking things through.
I guess
Oh,
maybe sometimes they ask questions because they are not settled with their own experience, maybe. So
yes,
if you deflect them, you say, if they say, how are you going to give birth? You say, well, how did you give birth? Tell me about your birth stories.
that's a great way to do it. Just,
I don't
yeah,
know. Not that I really want to
yeah.
hear a stranger's birth story, but
Or if they start laying into a story that is very scary and you don't want to hear it, you know,
That's what I'm worried about.
you could just be like, you know what, right now that just feels like I'm not there yet. Like that just feels like too much for me to hear. Like, can we talk about that down the road or something? You know, and this one I got from, who did I get this from? Paula Spencer Scott, who wrote a book on pregnancy etiquette, the name of which is escaping me. But
There's
this one was
whole book on
there's
it.
a whole book on pregnancy etiquette. Yeah. Would you excuse me? I have to go to the bathroom. Just get out of there. Oh, hands off the merchandise. If someone touches you and you don't want to be touched, you break it, you buy it, you know, you can make a joke out of it. But I think the bigger thing is, you know, as a parent, you're going to get unsolicited advice in those early stages of maybe having family visit. There's going to be all these times when you're going to need to set a boundary, or you're going to want to set a boundary. And pregnancy gives you these little moments to, you know, to practice it so that it's easier down the road. And there is something about motherhood too, I think, which if you're a people pleaser like me, it was really liberating, because once it was about my child, like it was hard for me to stand up for myself as much, but once I was standing up for my child, no problem, you know?
Yeah.
So it really, it's
saying
a really,
it for me is harder.
Yeah. But now saying it for me, it's easier because I've said it for my kids so many times.
That's true.
So,
I know I used to say, if people would say, oh, just enjoy it while they're little, because someday you'll look back on this moment. I know my kids are not little anymore, and I still don't look back on those moments with tenderness. Those were hard moments. Anyway, when they were doing that, I started saying, by the fourth child, I figured it out. I would say, oh, is that an offer for free babysitting? Because I could really use a break.
That's awesome.
And they'd be like, oh, well, I just enjoyed my kids. I'm like, I'm not actually enjoying it right now. So
yeah. I've been very honest about that when I've been struggling with motherhood. Like, actually right now, this isn't, when I pictured having 2 kids and going on a camping trip and playing a card game around the picnic table, I didn't picture waking up 7 times a night and not sleeping.
Amen.
Like there's all these experiences.
There's the Pinterest version of motherhood.
Yeah, and your own like reel that you've played in your head, if you have, of what it would be like. I honestly think I didn't really fully start enjoying it until, I don't know, my kids were like 7 and 13, or no, I don't have a 13-year-old, 7 and 11.
You're just anxious. You're excited for the future.
Yeah.
So you talk about it's okay to admit when you're struggling, and you're not a Debbie Downer if you talk about your struggles, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you get help, and how do you communicate that you're struggling without sounding like a Debbie Downer or being seen as, you know, somebody super pessimistic? Because I think that's kind of the worry. We don't want to like burden other people with our struggles.
Well, I think it depends on what kind of struggle you're talking about. I mean, if you're just having a hard day and someone that you're friends with asks you, I mean, I'm just honest. I'm just like, you know what, today's really hard. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, you know, and she's been crying all day or whatever it is. And I'm kind of struggling today, you know. If you really are struggling, and, you know, I know we'll get into talking about perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, then I think you want to pick someone you know will be receptive. Then you want to like figure out who in your life is not going to be judgmental and has been the most helpful in the past, and just sit them down and be like, can I just be brutally honest with you? Because I'm having a hard time and I trust you to help me with it. And I just want to tell you what's going on. So I think it depends. If it's just like sharing, you know, your struggle on the playground, I mean, I do it. Sometimes I get stares back, like they don't understand what I'm talking about. And I just tell myself, I'm sure that they do. They just don't want to talk about it. Because everybody struggles. Like, motherhood is not an easy thing. It's a life transforming, you know, career calling. I mean, it's a full-time gig. It's not going to be happy all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So, while you're pregnant, talk about the Google trap.
Oh yeah. It's so hard. This is the advice that I give out, that I probably violate the most. I mean, I did it just the other day when one of my kids had hives, and I was like, "Is it COVID?" But I do think if you're having a lot of anxiety about things in your pregnancy, or maybe you've had a loss before, and so that's kind of top of mind, I think you need to really limit how much you go online to look for answers, because ultimately there are people who can give you good answers, and usually they're your healthcare provider if you trust them, and if you don't, then I suggest you get a different one if you can.
Yep.
They might be a family friend who's a healthcare provider, people in your life that you can go to and say, this is weird, this is happening, you know. But if you go to the internet with like any kind of symptom, there will be people on there who have had the worst possible outcome of that symptom, or you already are looking for that because you're putting together spotting and miscarriage instead of spotting and normal. So you're going to get the answers that say your spotting is you know, forewarning a miscarriage. So I think, and a lot of times the stories people share online are the hardest stories because they go there to share them and to have support. So it's just really, you can easily fall into information that's either not actually good, not good medical information, not validated by a source, or is triggering if you're having anxiety around a health issue related to pregnancy. So I think if that's you, then you can even talk with your provider in one of your well visits and just say, like, if this comes up for me, like, what website do you think I should go to? Or
Yeah, I like that.
Or can I call you, or can I email you? Because I've got a lot of, you know, because I had postpartum anxiety after my first daughter was born, when I was pregnant with my second, my doctor who was the same, you know, we just had an open email policy, and I would just be like, okay, I'm freaking out about this. What do you think? You know, and he was very blunt with me, which in a really good way. Like,
Yeah.
you know, Kate,
Keeping you
no,
grounded.
yeah, exactly. So I think
Well, the
like
other
finding
thing,
the sources that you trust, and
yeah.
not just putting yourself out to the winds, because you're gonna
Well,
hear bad stories. And
Google's
that's
great if you want a quick answer. How long is the Nile? You know, if you want really quick things.
right. What's a substitute for lemon extract?
Yeah, but if you want, I had one of my babies little ask, is God real? And I was like, well, you know, there's proof on both sides, and it's really a faith thing. He goes, well, why don't you just Google it, Mom? And I'm like, we expect Google to have all the answers, but
Right.
really it's just a collective.
It's just a reflection of humanity.
Yeah, exactly. So I actually say find a good book, because the books are well researched.
I should answer that.
Yeah, Strong as a Mother. Seriously, I've seen
Yeah.
a lot of birth books in my day, and this is a great one. But because these are more researched, they're more carefully the information is more carefully curated. Somebody has put a lot of time and effort into doing this, and it's not just somebody spouting off, venting their birth trauma or their opinions on a free platform, right?
Yeah, I had one book post giving birth that was my go-to for any kind of sick kid thing, because it was so clear. It was like, a high fever is okay if they're acting normal, you know, like if they're acting really weird and they have a low fever, that could be like, it was, and I would just listen to it, and I would just, that's the answer, you know. And if it was, yeah, you might want to call your doctor, then I'd call my doctor. So that, yeah, a good well-researched book is also an excellent resource.
So what does self-care mean to you?
So I feel like self-care gets a bad rap because of a couple of reasons. You know, one, people think that it means like going and having margaritas with your girlfriends or a mani-pedi, or they think that it means sort of taking care of yourself where society fails to take care of mothers, which dives into like a political discussion. But for me, what I think about with self-care is figuring out what are the elements of your life that make you function well, and what are the things that make you feel like yourself and make you feel joy. So, you know, I don't necessarily, like, a mani-pedi can be a fun thing to do. And if being with friends really, maybe not now in COVID, but, you know, eventually it will be again. And if being with friends is really a fulfilling thing for you, then that could be self-care. But if you grew up singing in a choir or in the Glee Club, you know, finding a singing group that you can do once a week, to me is like really brings you back to who you are, just brings you joy for an hour. You're singing, you're not thinking about the rest of your life. And sleep, there's sort of two levels, I guess, I think about. One is the basics that we all need for our mental health to function well, and research has shown time and again, and that's enough sleep. Moving your body doesn't have to be, training for a marathon, but like consistently moving your body in a way that feels good to you. Eating well, and doing what you can to control stress. So all of those are kind of my bare bones. Like, as I was heading into virtual learning, and I knew that I would be sharing my office with an 8-year-old, and she would be dealing with Zoom meetings and stuff. I was, 2 weeks before I started going to bed on time. I meditate every morning. I exercise every morning. Now I have older kids, so I have some space to do those things. But I knew that I've figured out over the years the elements I need to put into place that make me feel, that sort of give me that baseline stability. So that's kind of like the foundational self-care. And then on top of that is thinking about what brings you back to yourself. And I think about like playing an instrument, singing, karaoke, yoga, sometimes exercise, and what brings you back to yourself are the same thing. Having time with friends, having time without friends, reading a book. Sometimes I'll just announce to my family, like, I'm going to go read for 2 hours, which, again, because I have older kids, I can do that now. So I think it's really about a trial and error process of figuring out what makes you feel stable and good, and then what makes you feel joyful, and then doing what you can to put those elements in place in your life, and not feeling, and knowing that if it means less playtime with your kid, or if it means your partner taking over bath time, if it means a loss to your kid, that's not a loss to your kid. That's a gain for your kid, because a happy, healthy parent, a patient parent, a well-slept parent is a better parent.
Yes.
So they're going to have a better quality of experience with you. And bonus, you're modeling taking care of yourself, which you want them to do their whole life. So
exactly.
Anytime I start to feel I used to feel guilty, but now I don't. Anytime it starts to creep in, I'm like, but here I am showing them that, my back is hurting, and I'm going to take a hot bath, or I'm impatient and I'm going to go read. And they'll suggest it to me now. They'll be like, Mom, maybe you should lie down.
Maybe you need a timeout, Mom. Maybe you need to go take a shower.
They will. They'll say exactly that. Yeah.
I love it. But self-care is more, from what I hear you saying, it's more about finding the things that help you function and be whole and grounded. So if getting a mani-pedi is that for you, great. But for me, it's having my laundry done so that I'm not like digging through to find something to wear. So for me, it's making sure that my laundry is done.
Yeah, it could be, for me,
or I love sleeping in a clean bed. So I change our sheets a lot more often than my husband would like, would prefer, like he doesn't care.
Right.
But that's a self-care for me. I love going to bed in a fresh bed. So,
and that's huge.
That's self-care.
Yeah. Yeah. I love coming downstairs to a clean kitchen in the morning. And
so my mom said that too. I don't get that one. Yeah, I don't get that one.
No, that one. I'm a clutter. Clutter makes me feel very stressed out. So
yeah. But again, then don't be judgmental of other people's self-care routines, because I know my mom would like sacrifice, come hell and high water. Her dishes were done by the time she went to bed. She did not want to wake to a dirty kitchen. And me, I'm like, I want to read. I need I need my downtime in bed. So I'll leave the dishes till the next day. And both of us are functioning just fine.
Right. And sometimes it's just like getting real about what that is for you. Like, because it could be easy to think, well, I shouldn't be leaving my dishes in the sink. But no, if that means you get upstairs and you get reading time done and you don't mind dealing with them in the morning, then do that.
Yeah. So my mom's self-care, I shouldn't have shame, guilt that my self-care routines aren't the same as my mom or my friends.
Yeah. Because you're not your mom or your friend.
So you mentioned getting the partner involved. So let's talk about the conversation of co-parenting. The conversation's thrown, or the topic is thrown around a lot, but I kind of want to ask you what your thoughts are on what co-parenting means, and how to kind of navigate what's generational expectations for gender roles, or what's happening in your family, and how to kind of navigate that for you. What does co-parenting with your partner mean?
Yeah. So I actually have a section on that in the book. And when I was researching it, I realized all the things I had done wrong,
Yeah, yeah,
and that I wish I
of
had done
course.
differently. Because I think I went into it with the expectation, like, my husband's a feminist, I'm a feminist, we believe in equality. You know, it's a little bit like the conversations that's happening around Black Lives Matter right now. Like we thought that everything was agreed upon, but like what actually happens is different than belief.
Right. So talk about that, because that's
Yeah. So I think that you know, we fundamentally were like, we're going to be equal parents, you know, we're going to do things equally. But like, I gave birth and I breastfed, and at a certain point I was laid off my job, and so I was the one primarily home, and then I started working from home, and just the gender roles just crept right on up us, you know, like I was doing all the cooking, and I knew all the pediatrician phone numbers, and you know, it wasn't co-parent. I mean, he was pitching in wherever he could and whenever he was home, but it wasn't structured in a way that really felt like an equal partnership. So when I researched it for the book, I talked to people and they were like, you need to get, and we had talked about sort of like, what are our values around parenting? We talked about discipline. We talked about some big picture stuff, which I think was useful, but you really need to get granular if you're planning to have a child with somebody, and say, like, what are you going to be responsible for? What am I going to be responsible for? And,
it's
you
an
know,
ongoing conversation. It's all
and
the
it can
time.
change, you know,
Because
but
like
in the,
we had this thing, he did barf and I did poop, because I couldn't do barf and he couldn't do poop. So that was our co-parenting in the early years.
right. There's these two economists that I once had on a podcast, and they called it inputs and outputs. So since she breastfed, he changed diapers because she was inputs and he was outputs.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, I love it.
I know. It was brilliant. I was like, why didn't I think of that? But I think, yeah, getting really granular, and it will change as you figure out what you like and out, you know, your work schedules, but saying like, this is your domain, this is my domain, and even creating a contract if that feels like something that's useful to you, the two of you, that says who's going to do what, and then you can reevaluate as you go. And I think if you start from the beginning with this, and if, let's say that somebody's giving birth and somebody's breastfeeding, then factoring that in and then figuring out all the other ways the other partner can be responsible for other arenas, or, you know, bottle feeding with pumped breast milk or formula if you're doing that. So I just think being really conscientious about the fact that co-parenting doesn't just mean you believe in equality between two partners. It means you build the infrastructure for that equality to happen.
Yeah. So
And
if you get asked out or you get asked for a commitment, if you find yourself saying, "Oh, let me check with my husband," more often than your husband does the same thing, I think that's kind of a red flag, or partner, not just husband. But, you know, my husband, he does come to me. He goes, "Hey, I want to have a boys' night on Friday night. Is that okay with you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, go for it." And then I do the same thing. "Hey, I'm going to podcast today. Can you keep the kids, you know, duct taped to the wall for me, please?" And he goes, "Sure, gotcha." So we do that back and forth, but this was years of figuring it out, because even though we both believed in co-parenting, and he was a feminist, you're right. It's just, what did he see modeled in his own family? And what did I see modeled in my own family? Even though we both have awesome sets of parents, it's still like crept in. Like you said,
right,
we kind of fell into these these traps, and we had this big fight. I mean, I like your idea of writing contracts, but then at the bottom your last line needs to be, and this can be overturned next week by another
right,
contract.
right. We could have another meeting.
Yeah. Like he's an accountant. I take care of meals mostly in March, but I hate cooking. So he does the summer meals when I'm scrambling to mostly do kids. I wrangle kids while he works during the day. So it's great, but it's a conversation, ongoing conversation.
Yeah, I remember early on, we went away for the weekend with a friend who didn't have kids, and she was doing this impression of what it's like to be with new parents. And she's like, you're asking if you can do everything. Like, honey, is it okay if I read the paper now? Like, I'm going to go to the bathroom. Is that all right with you? You know? And we were like, yes,
Yeah.
that is
Oh,
critical,
I
because
love
there's this
that.
small being that could stick their finger in a socket, and we need to know that somebody's on for it, you know? So yeah, I do think it's a constant negotiation, and then it gets more flowy as their needs become less all the time. But yeah, I just think being really transparent about it, and then also having check-ins. I mean, we do family meetings now with the kids, but having family meetings early on with just the parents to say, like, how's this going for you? You know, do you feel connected to the child? Would there be activities you could do, you know, because also sometimes the kinds of activities get really gendered, like the mom is doing all the comforting because she's
Yeah.
breastfeeding or
Well, I was
whatever,
just
or
going to
one
say,
of the moms, the
how come
breastfeeding.
they always bring me their trash? I'm the one that gets the trash, not their dad. I'm the one that gets the empty Capri Sun
Yeah,
containers. Why? That's a
I'm,
gendered role.
yep,
Mama's
yep.
trash bin.
I know. I'm always like, I'm not a garbage can. Find one.
I am not your customer service representative at the moment. Please check with the other parental unit.
Right.
They're like, but you'll say yes, Mom. I'm like, no, I won't. Go talk to your dad.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's an ongoing conversation. And I definitely think, and it's still, I still feel like our breakdown, because I work from home and because he works a, you know, more than 9 to 5 job, it's still very skewed. And so I'm very vocal about that with my daughters, you know, like, yes, it happens to be that,
Yeah,
you
I love
know,
that.
I do most of the cooking because daddy doesn't know how to cook. And it happens to be that I do this because I have the flexibility in my job, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But that's why he does all the laundry on the weekends, or that's why, you know,
And just having
and,
that discussion with the kids, for
and
sure.
I've
Yeah.
given whole areas over to him. The useful thing about the fact that I've been sort of the primary parent is that if I don't want an area, I give it to him. Like, I don't want school. I don't want to be in charge of what they haven't turned in or what's happening when. I'm like, your school guy, your homework guy, your communication with school guy, your teacher communication guy. And that works really well, because that's an area where I might get a little anxious, but I
Yeah.
just pass it
My
off to him, and
husband
I'm
does
like,
that too.
bring it up to the high levels if it needs to be, but otherwise you handle it.
He can left brain that stuff a lot better. He works better with spreadsheets, logins, computer tech. Like, we had a stylus emergency this morning. The Chromebook stylus was gone, and that was terrible, right? He deals with
We need
that.
a Chromebook style. That sounds good.
Apparently you can't do school without it, according to my 9-year-old. But I always keep the fridge full of food. And he's like, hey, babe, thanks for always making sure we have something to eat in the house, even if it's just ingredients.
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, some of that, yeah, you're right, is a little bit gendered, but at the same time, it's like strengths and weaknesses. Like, I don't like cooking. I have a hard time cooking, but I'm really good at managing the fridge situation and the pantry situation. And so I always make sure there's good ingredients. I'm
Yeah.
really good at helping the kids with their creativity and their businesses and getting them scheduled for get-togethers. I hate calling them play dates, but getting them with their friends. But I cannot stand homeschool or home from school, school from home. And
yeah, it's
yeah,
not ideal.
yeah. I love that. So co-parenting is, I mean, and it can start too in pregnancy when you're saying, me growing the baby means you run for pickles at midnight. That is a type of
Right.
co-parenting. That's
It's a division of labor.
it's a team. We got this together.
Yeah, and it's an understanding that that this is a shared experience in whatever way we can make it.
I love it.
Shared.
Love it.
Yeah.
So talk about postpartum. How do you rebuild your identity as a mother?
Yeah. Well, it's almost two things. It's like your identity as a mother, and then your identity as a person before you were a mother, and how do you maintain that?
We have 7 more hours, so if you want to, just kidding.
So I'm gonna get some spreadsheets and some flow charts.
Right. It's
diagrams.
a podcast. You're gonna have to explain it. I love it.
Yeah.
And then it also changes every subsequent child too. It's not just the first time you become a mother.
Yeah. I mean, I think really the bottom line for me is just getting in touch with what you're feeling and being okay with that. Like, and that almost everything we would talk about here would flow from that. Like, that feelings are just information, you know, like there's no bad feelings, there's no good feelings. Like, struggling as a mother doesn't mean you're a bad mother. Feeling weird, like being like, this isn't, I don't know if I even feel like a mother, you know, that's not bad. That's just information about like where you are on the journey. And so you take that information and you figure out what would help. Am I okay with feeling not, you know, I think it's, my husband talked about how pregnancy was like a dimmer switch, but I think motherhood is too. You know how like you're like, well, we're 11 weeks and we heard the heartbeat, but we're waiting for the 16-week scan. And so he's like, you're slowly turning up the dimmer switch till the light's on in the room. And I think it's the same for your identity. Like, so, you know, some women, some moms don't bond with their babies for like a year after they're born. You know, I mean, they're taking care of them, they're doing all the right things, but they don't feel that connection. You know, that's taking a longer time to develop, and that's okay. You know, and then one day, you know, something happens that they connect with, and they feel it. So I think just being true to wherever you are in the experience, and trying as best you can not to take on the expectations of society or your mother or your partner even about how you should be relating to
Again,
motherhood.
don't Google, don't be in the forums, don't
Yeah.
read.
Or don't judge yourself based on like the you know, the person who showed up at the preschool open house with the homemade cupcakes. And you know, I mean, okay, that's her. You showed up however you showed up, and that's you. So I think if you're really struggling, you know, I'm a huge fan of psychotherapy, which I know is not always affordable, but more and more insurance is covering it. And I think if you're really having a struggle, and certainly if you might be having a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder, therapy can be hugely beneficial because it's a space where you get to go once a week and just say all the things you're thinking without worrying what someone's going to think about you, you know, to this totally neutral, confidential party. And if you find someone you connect with, I think that can be really powerful. I think doing some of the self-care things, like if you are feeling disconnected from who you were before becoming a mom or before having a baby, maybe you don't even know that you feel like you've become a mom yet, but before having a baby, going back to those things, you know, like I said, karaoke night, or, you know, finding a singing group, or crafting, or whatever things brought you joy before, figuring out how you can work them into your early parenting life. And the thing about babies is like they can go with you wherever. They can they're transportable. You can take them with you to the beach to like sketch if that's what you like to do, you know. So I have this great parenting coach that I often interview, who's in Manhattan. Her name's Dana Rosenblum, and she's like, if you want to feel comfortable with your baby and you're having a hard time bonding, like do things you like to do with your baby. And she's like, that could even be watching Law and Order with your baby in the little, you know, car seat bassinet thing next to you. The baby doesn't care, you know, and you're interacting with the baby. You're doing something that makes you feel relaxed and good. And then that's going to help you feel more connected to the baby.
I'm going to say something that's probably pretty controversial, but I've learned through as now as a wise old mother that that it's better. I think for me, at least for me, it was better to go about my life and to go about who I am with the baby as my accent than to shift everything to the baby. Like, instead of making sure that, I mean, I always made sure their needs were met, but they came to work with me. They
Mm-hmm.
came on my consults with me. They just learned to be part of my life. And now as they're growing in they're coming up with their own identities, I get to play along with them sometimes. They'll be like, "Hey mom, I need to go mow lawns today. My son has a business. I need to go mow lawns today. So you're going to drop me off, and then, you know, you can do whatever you want while I'm mowing lawns, but I need you to pick me up." Little
Right.
demandoid. But I like, hey, how dare you? But at the same time, I expected him to do the same for me when I was
Mm-hmm.
doing my own things, and I love it because I don't have time to like go into it, but it's really fine that he does that, because instead of dropping my entire existence for the first 15 years of their lives, I
Yeah.
got to still be me. Now, the first couple of years were super, super rough as I was figuring this out. But by the fourth baby, I was doing a major, major construction project, and she was too young for preschool. So I set up my van as a little mini fantasy land with TV and snacks and new toys that she could only play with in the van. And she went to work with me every single day.
Yeah.
And I think that helped with the bonding. Like, I needed to get this done for my family. This is how we supported our family. And she came along. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's how most babies have been born
Right.
and raised for generations. I mean, that's how it
Mommy has
happens.
to milk the cows. Mommy has to
Yeah,
do the laundry.
working,
So
yeah, or
try not to
go in
fall
the
out of a
fields.
tree. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I love the movie Babies for that very reason. Have you ever seen that movie?
Yes.
Where they
It's
took,
the
it was like
documentary, right?
yeah, it's like a baby from Nigeria. I'm not sure which
Well, I think he went all over the world. There was one from Mongolia, right?
There were four countries. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Mongolia, Japan, San Francisco, and a country in Africa, maybe Namibia. And just watching all the different ways people raised, and they were all fine. And you know, the values were different. Like at the end, they have the moms watch the documentary, and some of them are like, "Oh my God," you know, like there's part where the Japanese baby is trying to accomplish something and she can't do it. And she's getting super frustrated and laying on the ground and crying and then sitting up and trying it again. And I remember the mom from Namibia being like, why are her parents not there helping her? Like, why?
Yep.
You know, but the parents were like, she'll figure it out on her own, you know? And it's
Yep.
like, those are both valuable approaches. It's just, if there was like one way to raise a baby, we would have figured it out by now. So I don't know
And a
why
lot of it is we're giving cultural cues to our babies as they grow up. So like I'm trying to embed them with feelings of confidence and self independence, like that they can make their choices. They don't need to self-reliance. There we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in other cultures where it really is the entire group needs to stick together in ways that we don't even understand as Americans for survival, then that kind of parenting wouldn't work. So we can't judge other parents. We don't
Yeah.
judge their cultures. So talk about, like, how do you know when your thoughts as a new mom are just normal and when they're starting to become a perinatal mood disorder, postpartum psychosis, OCD,
Sure.
depression?
So the first thing I would say is that they, you know, they used to always just say postpartum depression, and now they say perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And the reason they do that is because perinatal means it could be during pregnancy, it could be after. So like 50% of these disorders start in pregnancy, and then they can look very different than just the person on the, you know, you get that brochure from the hospital and there's like this really sad woman in a chair by herself, which doesn't even make sense because why is she by herself? And like, how does she look so put together even though she's sad? But that's not, yeah, I'm always like, like I didn't have a lot of moments of like sitting with a cup of tea in
Also, don't look at stock
armchair
photography.
looking
Yeah.
out the window. Right. But anyway, there's a whole range, and you know, basically your hormones go nuts during pregnancy and after having a baby, and this can even happen if you've adopted a baby. Post-adoption depression actually looks a lot, and anxiety looks a lot like if you've had a baby, if you've given birth.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
but basically, anxiety and rage are actually more common symptoms than just all out sadness. And so for me, when I had postpartum anxiety, I was extremely functional. You know, I was getting up, I was going to work, in the classic sense of being functional. You know, I was totally bonded to my baby and I just took care of her all, you know, but it was like hyperdrive. I was always worried about her. I couldn't sleep because of the worries about her. I threw up before work because of the worries about her. So I didn't recognize it for a long time. And it turns out that anxiety is much more common, and OCD and anxiety are kind of bedfellows. And one of the things that's really just normal for all new parents is having scary thoughts about their babies. It's basically like 90% of new parents have scary thoughts about their babies, like what if she rolls off this changing table? You're cooking dinner.
But your thoughts are even like, what if she rolls off the changing table and the bed falls on top of her?
Right.
What if the roof comes in? I mean, these ridiculous things, and you're like, come on, in your head, you're like, come on, that would never really happen. But then they still make your heart rate go up.
Yes.
And
I mean, you could be cooking dinner and see a knife. What if I picked this knife up and stabbed my baby?
what if the knife fell off the counter and flew across the
Did
room
a
and
triple
stabbed my
flip
baby?
and
Yeah.
happened to like go in her eye. Yeah. So, and it seems crazy, but what it is that, I mean, it's sort of like, have you ever been like in a subway station and the train's coming toward you and you think, what if I jumped in front of it? Or you're driving down the road and you're like, what if I veered into the oncoming traffic?
More often than I'd like to admit.
Yeah, and it's not a desire usually
No.
to kill yourself. It's what your brain is trying to figure out what could go wrong in this situation because I'm going to guard against it. So it has to like get creative and think about all the possible ways things could go wrong. And so that's exactly what your body is doing as a new parent. You're in this it's evolutionarily appropriate for you to be thinking about threats to your baby and even threats from you. So John Abramowitz, who's this awesome cognitive behavioral psychologist at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, he's like, it's even normal to be changing your baby's diaper and think, what if I sexually molested my baby? He's like, that's a hard thing to say out loud. That's a hard thing to hear, but that's a normal thing to think because you're thinking what could be the threats. And you're the only one in that room. So you would have to be the threat. So all those things are normal. They're fleeting thoughts that are just your brain's way of thinking about all the bad things that could go wrong. If you have those fleeting thoughts and then you're like, and then you like change your baby and you go about your way and you're like, that was weird, but it doesn't, and you have them here and there, but they're not upsetting you a lot. They're just passing. Then that's just normal parental adjustment. If you have those thoughts and they start really upsetting you, you really worry, like, what does this mean about me that I'm having these thoughts? Or you change your behavior. You're worried you're going to fall with your baby when you're walking down the stairs. So you start making your partner carry the baby down the stairs. I had one woman I spoke to who had this walk in LA that she would do, and she would go over an overpass over a freeway, and she was constantly worried she would drop her baby. So she changed her route. If you were worried about, what if I molested my baby, and you stop changing your baby's diapers, or you're so worried somebody else would that you don't let anybody else change your baby's diapers. So if you just start like getting into your life or occupying your mind in such a way, like for me, it was always worrying about my kids' health and it would keep me up all night. When it gets to that level, that's an anxiety disorder, potentially OCD. OCD usually is when you start creating behaviors to avoid the worries. Then there's something called postpartum psychosis. And this is what everybody hears about in the news. So it's very rare. It affects 1 out of 1 million moms. Oh God, I hope that's stats.
I know it's super rare. But we know these stories. They drive their vans into the ocean. Right. They drown their babies in the bathtub.
They jump out a window.
So rare.
That is so rare.
Enough that they make the news.
Even for women who have postpartum psychosis, hurting their baby is even more rare. So just because someone has postpartum psychosis doesn't mean they're going to hurt their baby. But what it means is they're having a psychotic break. They are breaking with reality. And so for them, usually if they do have a thought about hurting themselves or hurting their baby, it makes sense to them. Often it can come with a religious overtone, whatever your religious belief is telling me I need to do this. Or it can come from anxiety that you've somehow damaged your child so greatly, whatever reason, whatever, story your brain has concocted, that killing your child would be a better alternative than letting them live with this horrible whatever. So, so those are the stories you hear about in the news. And then everyone's like, she had postpartum depression. No. That was not postpartum depression. It was a psychiatric emergency, and it's totally treatable.
Yep.
And you can go on to be a totally functional parent. So I think like the important thing to know is having these scary thoughts is normal. And there's actually, I go into it at length in my book, but there's also a cool book called Good Moms Have Scary Thoughts by Karen Kleiman. That's you should have Karen on your show too.
I know.
That's a graphic book, and it's like just all the crazy thoughts you have as a new mom and just normalizing that like everybody has these thoughts. And so the question is, how do they make you feel? Are they making you feel so uncomfortable and they're affecting your life so much that you should get some professional support, either therapy, or in my case, I do therapy and medication, so that you can start enjoying motherhood, you know, the way it was intended to be enjoyed. It won't be easy, but it won't be like crushingly hard, you know. Or if these thoughts make sense to you, then that's an emergency. Or if you're with someone and they're expressing to you thoughts of hurting their baby and they seem very sure that it is the right thing to do,
Yeah.
then that's a psychiatric emergency. That person needs to go to the emergency room and they can be stabilized and treated.
Yep. And without judgment. I mean, there's still the stigma that if you have a psychiatric break, then you're always forever fragile. And
Mm-hmm.
I can vouch 100% that that's not true. That this is a huge hormonal event first, and then, like you
Yes,
said, the biological, the evolutionary reason for our brain doing this. It's an acute problem, not a chronic problem.
that's right. And with the right treatment, you know, you
It could
can
be
return to
completely fine.
normal. Yeah,
Yeah. But
yeah.
there's all the worries that if you admit to this, then CPS will come and take your kids.
And that's not
Oh, but
an
they do
invalid
still.
worry. That
Yeah,
is
they
not an
still
invalid
do.
worry, particularly if you are a mom of color. And so I think the key is, if that is happening to a mom, to get her to a, I mean, you need to get to an emergency room because it is an emergency situation, but then you need to get that emergency room connected to resources that can say, this is what's happening. This is the kind of treatment she needs. This does not mean that her child should be taken away from her. Yes, maybe she needs to be separated from her child for a period of time while we stabilize her. Although there are also mother-baby units
Yeah.
where the mom can get medical care and the baby can be there too, which is cool. But you know, I don't invalidate that worry, because in some communities that is a very valid worry.
Yeah.
And so the key in that situation is to get in touch with, and I would go through Postpartum Support International because they're the most
Love it.
connected.
Mm-hmm.
Postpartum, postpartum.net. Let me just double check that. And get through to someone who can talk with the resident, the person at the hospital, and explain what the situation is. There are
Yeah.
reproductive psychiatrists who specialize in this, and
They will not judge you. They will be on your
right,
side all the way to the end. And
yeah,
some of this is also pre-birth. So if your mother had a history of losing her marbles after babies were born, or if you're feeling really unsettled, then looking at these resources, confiding in people early, will
yeah,
also set the stage so that if it happens, people are like, oh, she was feeling unsettled at 8 months. This is, we need to get her help. I know for me, I didn't know what happened with my first two babies. The postpartum perinatal mood disorder is pretty severe, but I kept it to myself and managed. But that in and of itself caused trauma. And I just happened to, in passing with my midwife at the third, mention some of these intrusive thoughts, but I didn't say all of them because, gosh, I don't want to lose my kids. And she just looked at me. She goes, I think that you suffered a lot more than you needed to. And I want to make sure that you don't this time.
yes,
And she seriously completely turned my postpartum around. My third baby, the postpartum, I would say it was more of a depression, more of like a baby blues, but there was not near the magnitude, because she heard me, because she showed up for me, and she because some of it too is you have those thoughts, and then if you let them stay, they just kind of spend more time in your head. And then there's the plasticity. So the more you
yep,
spend time thinking about, the more your grooves in your brain, right?
yep,
So even her just giving me permission to not be okay and that she'd have my back. And by my fourth baby, I can literally say not a blip on the radar. So I went from pretty severe, probably should have had intervention, really needed intervention. Luckily, I don't know, the universe just had my back somehow, but it really, really, really for me was scary and very traumatic,
mm-hmm.
to having a pregnancy with absolutely no perinatal mood disorder. I know, like you say, it's treatable. I feel like in a lot of ways it's preventable, and it is definitely something that we shouldn't be shaming.
Yeah. And I've had so many women over the years reach out to me and, once, and I'm like, you can't believe how much better you can feel, how much sooner, like, and then they get help and they're like, oh my God, why didn't I do this sooner? I mean, you can't know until you know, but like, there really are good treatments, and where you really, none of us deserves to struggle to the point where motherhood feels, like an impossible burden,
And our babies and our partners don't deserve that either.
Nope. Nope. So yeah, I would say, I have on my website at katerope.com, if you go into news and events, I have a very detailed, post about when pregnancy or new motherhood doesn't feel like the happiest time of your life. And it has all the symptoms, and it has all the, resources like Postpartum Support International and others, that you can reach out to and, get someone on, just getting someone on the phone who can validate that what you're feeling is common. I mean, 1 in 5 women experiences a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder.
That's
So
a lot.
20%. So
20%.
that's a lot. And that's
I think it's
like
underreported.
probably more than that. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's really common. And there's good treatment, and there's people who will understand and want to get you help. So,
yeah.
Reach out to them. Just be brave. Just make that phone call,
and talk to your partners, talk to your partner, talk to your support team before your birth about how you would like to be treated and how you would feel about, just.
Yeah. I mean, my husband and I made a deal before my first pregnancy that any feeling I was having afterward, I could say to him, and he wouldn't judge me. He would get me help. So I could even say to him, like, I wish I hadn't done this. We wish we didn't have a baby. Whatever it was, I could say it. And
I mean, you were allowed to eat pickles and ice cream just 6 months earlier. So how come you're not allowed to say you'd like these crazy thoughts, right?
Right. And then he would get me help. So I often tell people to find that person for you that you can go to and just say all the things you're thinking. And also to bookmark Postpartum Support International and other websites with symptoms. And if you have a history of anxiety or depression or bipolar disorder, then kind of getting your village on board with like sharing it with your closest friend. Here are some symptoms. If I start acting like this, will you talk to me? Because I did that for my second birth. I was much more prepared, and I did have postpartum anxiety, but I was in and out of it because I knew what it was, and I got treatment right away. And it was like the express train versus taking the local. And so yeah, I think just preparing for the possibility doesn't mean it's going to happen to you.
Yep.
But if it does, you know what to do. You have a starting point to feel.
And I think as we give more focus to it, the science will respond and have more options. Like HG, the hyperemesis gravitarum, I can't even say it, but the throwing up, the so bad that you have to be on IV. That's a really, really serious disorder that's only affects pregnant women, and we treat it. We take care of it. You don't shame the woman for it. You don't have any, hoopla about it. You just care for the woman, right? It's not her fault. Right. I feel like postpartum mood disorders are the same thing. It's just something that happens, and we need to have acute care, and we need to honor the person and keep them well, and then she'll be.
And we need to screen for it. Like it's twice as common as gestational diabetes, and everybody takes that disgusting test at 20 weeks when you drink that liquid and then pee. And like similarly, we should be screened at our prenatal visits and at our postpartum visits, not just once, but several times. Yeah. And they should be broader screenings that touch into anxiety and these lesser known symptoms. Because this is the number one complication of pregnancy and childbirth. Yeah. And we don't treat it like that.
Number one complication, other than having a baby. That's the number one complication of getting pregnant. Yeah. Is having a baby. So how do people find more about you, find your amazing book, just devour all the resources you put together?
So Strong as a Mother, which I have right here, is available wherever books are sold. I always love it if you can support a local independent bookstore, especially now. But you can also just order it on Amazon if you ain't got time. And katerope.com is my website. And I think I'm at Kate Rope on Twitter, and Strong as a Mother book on Facebook and Instagram.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So Kate Rope, KATEROPE.com.
Yep.
And as always, if you have any questions about this episode or want me to reach out to Kate on your behalf, my email is media@birthcircle.com. Thank you so much, Kate. This has been really
Thank you for having me
fun
on.
conversation.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
Please visit us at birthcircle.com, join our Facebook groups, or find us on Instagram and Pinterest. We hope you'll use our resources to support your birthing experience.